We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Friday edition of Free Association Radio. This is Robert Phoenix, broadcasting to you live from the heart of Texas. It is the 20th of September. The beautiful and grand harvest moon has just passed us, and we are now in the Aries moon and rapidly approaching the autumnal equinox. That's on Sunday, the 22nd, and we flip seasons up here in the northern hemisphere, and fall is certainly here in Austin, Texas. It is down to 86 degrees. Hallelujah. And raining. We're getting some fall rain. And I want to thank everybody for their well wishes. I was actually physically mostly okay. I was just completely spent and out of it, and had two back-to-back nights of insomnia, and I had to prepare for the interview later that day with Carre Otis, and so I just had to gather my forces. And you'll hear that interview later on in the show, in the second hour of the show, and it's a pretty powerful interview. We talk about her book and her life and the ravages of being a model and a celebrity, especially the ravages it took, or the toll it took on her when she was quite young. She was essentially a runaway at the age of 15, and by 16 she was knocking on the door of John Casablancas in New York, and then shuttled off to elite Paris, where her strange odyssey in the world of high fashion and celebrity and the demonic relationship with Mickey Rourke, the marriage to Hades, eventually takes place. But before we do that, we're going to set it all up with an hour's worth of a voyage into the strange and into the weird and into the depth of programming and symbols and all of the other esoteric ephemera that we are bombarded with on a daily basis. And I thought it would be great to bring Freeman Fly and his partner, Jamie Hanshaw, onto the show today as a prelude to talking about Carre and her experience. So let's click through here and bring my fellow former Austinite and his partner onto the airwaves. Hello there.
Hello, Robert.
Hey, Freeman.
Hello,
how are
are we
you?
coming through?
Yeah, you're great,
All
man.
right.
Loud and clear. Yep. So how I was just on trying to get to your website, and it was not up. Did you guys figure that out?
Well, it seems like it's down for some and up for others. It's working fine for me, and Jamie's in the same room with her computer, and it wasn't loading on hers. I find that FreemanTV.com gets some of the weirdest censorship. I really don't know what's going on. But
it is
as far as I know, it's up.
Okay, so maybe if you're out there in the listening audience, you want to do just a test run on Freeman TV, Freeman's website, and if you can post some of your results in the chat room to see if you can find his website, that'd be great. Give him some real-time feedback. I was trying to get on the on your site before the show, and with both browsers was not able to. So let's hope we can get some good feedback, and it's a ubiquitous experience for everyone. How's it going, Freeman?
Well, pretty good. Yeah, this has me thinking about a number of things that have occurred with this, and the most recent one was when I posted the article on Miley Cyrus's performance at the VMAs and how she had invoked Kali. I posted this article, and then, of course, I Googled myself, and I did not come up at all. Well, actually, I did at first, and then someone reposted the article onto their website, and a number of people did, and suddenly I was gone from the Google search altogether. And you could find the reposting of it, but you couldn't find a direct link to my website. And then I posted it as a video up on my YouTube channel, Freeman TV, and it did not come up in YouTube searches with the exact title placed into the YouTube search engine. So I was completely blocked on the whole Miley scandal for days and days. And then I posted it up to my blog. I have a separate blog on Blogspot, and all of a sudden, boom, I was back in the mix again. It was really bizarre. And really, it was disappointing because I knew no one was finding this article that I thought was really important.
It is bizarre because if you're being thwarted by Google search, and yet you were able to post to Blogspot, which is owned by Google, that's a very strange sort of algorithm there. But I can understand that. Let's get into this Miley thing a little bit. Jamie told me yesterday that you guys were on this radio show yesterday where a guy was actually broadcasting live from, was it Disneyland or Disney World? Which one was it?
It was Disneyland.
That is so bizarre. Jamie said that he claims to be Brad Pitt's illegitimate son. I've actually heard of this guy before. I had my material up on a forum a long time ago. I did a 3-parter on Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, and this strange forum in England, it was like a women's website, but they had this massive forum about clones and doubles and all kinds of stuff. It was blowing my mind. They were posting my stuff and reposting, and they'd actually talked about this guy, this illegitimate son of Brad Pitt. What's that story all about?
Well, his name is James Weston, if you want to look him up on Facebook. And he also has a website that he's trying to get support for because he really just wants to meet his dad, and have a relationship with him. But according to him, his story is that they wanted him to marry Natalie Portman at one point. They wanted him to marry Britney Spears. They wanted him to have a baby with Natalie Portman. He said he would get money from Bill Gates if that happened. So he has a lot of strange and inside connections to what they try to offer you in the name of fame.
So this is Jamie that we're talking to. Hi, Jamie. How are you?
Hi. Good.
So his name is James Weston?
Yes.
How did he find out that he was Brad Pitt's illegitimate son? Or son of wedlock, whatever that is.
His story goes that they went to go see a movie with Brad Pitt. I'm not sure. It was like 12 Monkeys or one of the ones that came out in the 90s. And he was sitting there with his mother, and his mother starts having a reaction when they're watching the screen, and she has to go outside, and he follows her outside, and he says, "What's wrong? What happened?" She said, "That guy in the movie is your father." And so that's kind of the realization that she had. They had met before Brad Pitt was famous, and then when she went to go see the movie, she recognized him and told him that was your dad.
Have you seen pictures of him?
We met him went on our bus trip when we went to California. He actually lives in the town where I grew up, so we stopped there and we had a little chat with him.
Does he look like Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
Interesting. And so how did he rig up his radio show from Disneyland? I mean, was it just kind of like a pirate thing, or how did that all work out?
Well, we were actually on the Oz radio show with Paul Jameson, and James was the co-host for that day, so he was calling in from Disneyland, and then the show was hosted by Paul on the show called Oz.
Uh-huh. And when they've actually done... Go ahead, Freeman.
We've actually done a couple of broadcasts out of Disney, and it's a bit frightening. I was on with Dr. Bill Beagle, who discusses deep underground military bases and communication with, genetically modified remote-controlled attack baboons and such. Dr. Deagle is really a trip, and to be standing there in Disney World talking with him, it was surreal, and really we both got frightened because we realized as we walked into Disney World that we had given them our entire biometrics. They'd taken my credit card, they'd taken my thumbprint, they'd taken my picture inside of Siemens' big spaceship Earth, and then they even asked us where we lived, and we could watch our faces go from the computer screen over to a large map where everyone was being databased. And then as you go through Disney World, now we know that Disney is a military-industrial complex, that it's nothing but the military-industrial corporations that are putting and sponsoring these rides. I mean, Siemens, their corporate logo on this ride was also on the walls of Auschwitz. This is the type of people you're dealing with when you're dealing with Disney. And we realized that they knew exactly what ride we were on, because you get pre-tickets to get in the line, and it got to be a bit frightening because it seemed like the characters of the Disney characters were popping up around us just spontaneously, interrupting the communications and things.
That sounds surreal. It sounds like an acid trip.
Yeah.
And not a good one either. So let's get into this Miley thing. Let's go back in time with her and the whole Hannah Montana alter split personality, and then ramping up to this manifestation of Kali. What have you guys found in the kind of the overall architecture of the Disney programming as it relates specifically to her? What's going on with her?
Well, Jamie and I had an amazing adventure as we decided to go into stores and see how many Hannah Montana products we could find. Now, honestly, when we began the film, we had no idea what we were in for, and we really just thought it was going to be just something silly. But we ended up doing 3 nations, England, Australia, and America, and we did not find a Hannah Montana free zone. And we're talking about going to auto parts stores, to hobby stores, to art stores, to Home Depot, and of course Walmart and Target were just, filled. They had entire Hannah Montana aisles. And you can watch our film on freemantv.com of us, our own amazement as we started to discover that there was a product for every piece of your life that had Hannah or Miley Cyrus's face on it, right? Blown away with the amount of plastic that they had put out. So we tend to notice which programmings are mostly highlighted by these stores. And, we highlight the Princess Warrior programming and how this is affecting the children and causing and leading to warfare. And as you walk down your boy aisle, you walk down your girl aisle, you can see the definitive programming, and you can see the definitive shows that they choose, like Toys and Spider-Man and Transformers, and then Hannah Montana, Monster High for the girls, and even alien hybrid dolls called Novi. You can see the dark programming, the dark hero, dark warrior programming going on left and right in both the girl and boy aisles. So when we looked to Miley Cyrus and the Hannah Montana Disney extravaganza, it wasn't so much what was going on in the show, which was pretty asinine, but more just the concept of the best of both worlds, as her show states. Because Miley, or Hannah, shows us that there is this separation. There is the them, the elite, the celebrities, and then there's the lowly you. So she played both roles as Miley Stewart, the lowly you, and Miley Cyrus or Hannah Montana as the elite. And so this type of programming was going into the children's minds to establish this separation of the elite versus the lowly you. That's one of the main programmings coming out of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing that I have been sort of tracking with her is the deep involvement of her father as her handler. And I've read some information that from people who were witnesses at the Bohemian Grove that both Billy Ray Cyrus and Miley Cyrus were there over 10 years ago. Have you guys stumbled into any of this material?
No, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, there's a guy that writes on Makeow every now and then. He does a lot of Royal Arch X stuff. It's really kind of fascinating and dark. He gets into the whole Simon Cowell world. And he was talking to, he had actually been to the Bohemian Grove. That was the world he'd been indoctrinated into, and he had an eyewitness account of Miley Cyrus and Billy Ray Cyrus happening there. What do you think triggered her? I mean, obviously there's a trigger event going on for the VMAs. What do you think that was, and where's this all going with her?
Well, first, we had to witness her coming through the tweens. And as they started to set her programming, she was at the Teen Choice Awards. And they basically established her just like Anna Nicole. Because you watch the Anna Nicole show, which was the first meltdown that I tracked in this whole situation. I have a film out called Anna Nicole, Brittany, and Mind Control that really highlights what happened with Anna Nicole, who Danny Lynn might be, and how this all could play out in a ritual aspects. And Anna Nicole was shown coming out of a trailer, getting on the stripper pole, and then eventually marrying a Nazi billionaire, who was 90 years old. In the same way, Hannah Montana or Miley Cyrus came out at the Teen Choice Awards. The Teen Choice Awards, this is before she was an adult. And she comes out of a trailer. This is just as the American economy is crashing, as they did the banker bailout. And she comes out singing "It's a Party in the USA." She comes out of her trailer on the stage, right? It's a stage performance, trailer up on set, and she comes out of this and climbs aboard an ice cream cart with a stripper pole on top, and begins doing stripper performances on this ice cream cart for the teens in the Teen Choice Awards. So in this same way, they're kind of establishing the route that you have to do to come up through celebridom, which is basically prostituting yourself. Mm-hmm. Did you have something?
Yeah. Well, what we're seeing with these girls is they choose them, and they get their programming, and then they're used as ritual goddesses, and this goes back 10,000 years. So every time you're seeing a VMA performance or a Grammy, you have to think this is high-profile ritual. It's part high-profile ritual, part psychological warfare on the common class, because they're seeing all these people glitzered up and glammed out, arriving in limos on the red carpet and in their pretty dresses and everything, and they can't afford anything. So that's the psychological warfare for the public. But then for the more esoteric side, the people who can have eyes to see, they're doing these occultic rituals on stage for each other. And they use these girls. They build them up, just like they would in the olden days with the virgin sacrifice. She would be the chosen one and be worshipped as a queen for a period. And then when the stars were aligned, they throw her into the volcano. So this is kind of what we're seeing. And, South Park has a really good episode on this, the one where they shoot Britney Spears in the face, and they still make her get up there and perform, right? And then at the very end, they say, who's the next ritual sacrifice? And they say, Hannah Montana, and it's going to be a good harvest this year.
Yeah, those guys are on the inside, and I think they've been on the inside for a very long time. When I say on the inside, I think that I don't think they're outsiders looking in. They're not like you and me. I think that they've got connections. They know exactly what's going on. And I think they may be driving the programming just a little bit. That's my take on Parker and Stone.
we have it on good authority that a Freeman fan was on the writing staff of South Park for a couple years back in 2010. So he could have been slipping in some key nuggets into the show.
They definitely were.
So I wanted to ask you, because I know, Jamie, you've got a kind of an abiding interest in Katy Perry and the Katy Perry Russell Brand romance, faux romance, whatever that was or is. And I want to get to that, but I also wanted to ask you, Katie, and you, Freeman, excuse me, that seems like that the women that they're using, and even men to a certain extent, but the young women, that they perform certain types of roles, or they manifest as certain types of archetypes. Like, Freeman, you were referencing Hannah Montana with Anna Nicole Smith. And to me, there's this kind of continuity with, sort of this white trash kind of image and portrayal of a certain kind of American character. Now, Katy Perry is never portrayed that way. She's portrayed in a completely different light. And I'm wondering if you guys can speak on sort of the different manifestations and the different kind of archetypes that these young women portray and why they portray them that way.
Okay. Well, Katy Perry is interesting because she comes from a very strict Christian upbringing, and so we've seen a serious backlash against that. Now, in the type that you can see with Aleister Crowley, he had a very strict Christian upbringing as well, which propelled him to go the exact opposite 180 and proclaim himself, the Antichrist 666, because he was rebelling against his Christian authorities. So Katy comes from this background. Her first song was about kissing a girl, right? I kissed a girl and I liked it. So this is programming that also comes from Aleister Crowley's religion, who was trying to rid the world of the oppressive Christian values of, normal sex and procreation. So anything that was degenerate, anything that was bisexual, actually the more degenerate that he could make it, the better, because, you were just freeing yourself of oppressive Christian morals. So she's wheeled out to the girls and trying to get them to consider lesbianism and other things.
Katy as the more militant aspect of the programming. So there's the one level where you are the trash, the trailer trash, and of course this level of honey boo boo programming going out to the rest of the world, I see as sociological engineering or psychological warfare against America. So the considerations of America are these hoarders and honey boo boos, and even Sex in the City is doing a large job of promoting the great Satan that is America, that they want the rest of the world to see. Now, Katy Perry, she is the golden child of the military-industrial complex. After she came out with things like Kiss a Girl, then we have Part of Me, where she is putting out this militant programming, all dressed in military and saying, this is the part of me you can't get rid of. So this was right at the same time as the Russell Brand breakup, and we really felt that was engineered.
Well, and they also needed her to support Obama. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times she appeared in public with a dress that had Obama's face on it, or one of her dresses was just a ballot with Romney and Obama, and the Obama box was checked. So they really needed her in this last election to keep Obama popular with the youth.
And then finally, the latest level of what I'm looking at with my Katy Perry ET examination, I have the occult meanings of Katy Perry's ET, because this one really struck at my heart, because when I'm looking at the situation, I'm rarely looking at the political spectrum. I look to the occult. I look to the esoteric sides and what is being ritually performed before us. And the concept of invoking and evoking is really what ceremonial magic is all about. and that is to bring an entity into your soul. And as we start to look into the programming of this, now, first of all, we learn that the elite, this is what they're doing. There's ritual magic going on all the time. All of our leaders are members of the Freemasonic orders. We've got, of course, Skull and Bones and the Bohemian Grovers and all of the ritual magic, ceremonial magic that is constantly being performed. We want to understand why this is occurring. We have learned that they are channeling different entities, such as like John Dee back with the Enochian days and Edward Kelly, and now we find them channeling the nine gods of Egypt, the Ennead, through such characters as Uri Geller, this Israeli psychic that would bend spoons and such. The communication with extra-dimensional entities is really what we found the purpose of ritual magic to be. You call them angels, call them demons, call them what you will. In the 21st century, we'll see them as interdimensional entities. And the training that has been coming out when you start to look into Disney programming especially, so you have your Percy Jackson series, or you have your Kane Chronicles, Rick Riordan. These, especially the Kane Chronicles, are training tools on Egyptian magic for invoking these gods into your soul. I'm reading Rick Riordan, the Kane Chronicles from Disney, along with the doctoral Egyptian magic books that I have to understand the ritual aspects of Egyptian magic. And I'm getting more details from Rick Riordan's fiction than I was from the doctor I was studying for the Egyptian magic. So Katy Perry's E.T. video does this very same thing. It enchants the idea of, that too, but enchants the idea of bringing out a supernatural a baby to be, having sex with angels or demons, and then to have all the little girls singing along, I want to be a victim, I want to be abducted. And, of course, then we have Kanye West coming out saying, I own you because I probed you, because I abducted you. And these are, when you start watching little girls sing this, I want to be a victim, it really is frightening. And then the entire programming of this invoking of an entity into your soul is the ultimate magical aspect of this whole thing.
Wow, that really opens up a whole Pandora's box when you really begin to look at it from that level. What I wanted to ask you, by the way, we're talking with Freeman and Freeman Fly and Jamie Hanshaw of Freeman TV. You can find out more about them on Freeman TV and also Freeman's website, The Freeman Perspective. And they have a great book out called Weird Stuff, Volume 1. And Freeman also has if you like this material, you can grab it on a flash drive. He's got a ton of material on a flash drive. You can basically own it for $40 and then download all of what Freeman and Jamie have been working on for a very long time. And you can go to Freeman TV and find out about how to get both the book and the flash drive. What I wanted to ask you is what occurs in the space between the actual ritual and the people witnessing the ritual? Now, you say that there is perhaps some people might be familiar with the term moonlets. Well, moonlets might be, or golem, or whatever that is, a homunculus that's born, a supernatural being evoked during these rituals. What happens to the viewer? Does the viewer take that in on a holographic level, on a spiritual level? How does it impact the people witnessing these events?
That has been a big question of the entire scenario, because even all the way back to Adolf Hitler and his programming, as he stood up on stage with the big lights and having everyone lined up in a religious fervor, and the chanting and the Sikh Heils and all of the things that go along with this, it is to enrapture the audience. And to cause a certain mindset within them. I know you've got a lot to say on this, but I'll let you catch up. So the effect of what's going on through these programmings has been a big question for us as well. And there has been obvious results in the effect on large mass consciousness for both negative and positive effects. I actually was involved in I didn't mean to be, but I was involved in the experiment in Washington, D.C. back in '93 that lowered the crime rate through positive thought. It just so happened that me and my whole Rainbow crew were there at the same time, and I think we had a strong effect on what happened in the results of their tests in D.C. So in the same way, if you can affect the consciousness of masses, then you affect the ether, if we could say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it also has to do with the reason why they would always perform their rituals on the ley lines, right? Because those are the currents of energy that are running through the planet. So this is another way that you can affect the mass stream of consciousness without people witnessing it, because it runs through the energy current that affects everybody. But what you have to understand is that, the history of rock and roll is very interesting because the father of modern rock and roll is Robert Johnson, right, who supposedly had this supernatural experience at the crossroads, and he came back and was a master guitar player after he supposedly sold his soul to the devil. So this is like the very first story of the beginning of rock and roll, is selling your soul to the devil, which many celebrities today openly admit that they did, tongue-in-cheek or not. Bob Dylan doesn't look like he's joking when he says it. Katy Perry says it in a more light-hearted way, but it's like, is this true? So, this crossroads ritual that Robert Johnson supposedly has gone through, that is straight from voodoo, right? The god of the crossroads is Legba, and every voodoo ceremony begins with an opening to the god of the crossroads, because he guards the material world and the spiritual world. And so you have to understand that voodoo is at the heart of rock and roll very much, and voodoo is nothing but a possession cult. So the very purpose and point of all their rituals is to become possessed by these spirits they call the Loa. And they believe that the Loa can possess an entire area. So a concert is, your perfect example of a mixture of a technological satanic voodoo ritual to possess an entire area and a group of people.
Absolutely. I mean, I think probably the most egregious example of that was the Altamont experience in 1969 in California, where the Rolling Stones hired the Hells Angels, and the Hells Angels killed the young guy Meredith. What's his name? Anyway, yeah, absolutely. And they actually played "Sympathy for the Devil" when he was killed during Altamont, but the Mayles brothers edited it and changed the sequence of the songs for the concert so that it wouldn't look or appear as though Sympathy for the Devil was being played. And what was really interesting is that George Lucas was one of the cameramen on that crew. And of course, he goes on to much greater height and fame. So are we actually, this is a question I've asked other researchers, and maybe you guys have asked yourself this, are we participating in the ritual? Are we participating in this, the revelation of the hierarchy by breaking down these symbols, by looking at it, by witnessing it? How much of a willing accomplice are we as we work to try to untangle this stuff?
I really think when you come at it from a zombie perspective, where you're just part of the symbol system, then you receive this data. But if you're analyzing the situation, looking at what's being programmed, then I don't think it has the effect. And I think a lot of us are waking up to that. We've had a boon of conspiracy talk, of podcasts and videos, and my TV show's been running since 2005 trying to expose all of this. And we've had a massive impact on people now viewing information instead of just taking it in. But there are actually intentional attempts to put these type of demons, if we will, into people. If we look to Tool, now I followed the Grateful Dead for a while because I really like the gypsy lifestyle. I wasn't really a Deadhead. I never listened to the Dead, but I followed around just because those were my kind of people. And I learned a lot about what was going on with them. And it seemed to me that one of the main aspects of the Grateful Dead was to pull all the free thinkers into a loop and have them follow this Pied Piper around. And definite CIA connections, definite programming going on. But the one that I found most curious today, and the reason I brought up the Dead, is because whenever I talk about the band Tool, the Tool fans are so much more diehard than the Deadheads ever were, that if you were to speak ill of Tool to any of their fans, they'll punch you in the face. I mean, they really, they take this stuff very seriously. And Tool intentionally programs Kabbalistic magic into their music. They set their beats to it, their tones to it, to the Tree of Life. It is a ritual, magical performance, to the point that the drummer blogs about learning the Enochian watchtowers. Now, this is John Dee's magic. He was Queen Elizabeth's sorcerer, and he used a channel, Edward Kelly, to bring communication from the angelic realms and developed Enochian magic. Well, the drummer of Tool decided he was going to invoke and bring these watchtower angels into his songs and began practicing the names of these angels, trying not to consider them any further than the syllables. But he blogged that he had the most horrendous nightmares in night that he had ever had in his life, that he was definitely traumatized by demons all night long. And then the very next day turned and taught Maynard, the singer of Tool, how to pronunciate these correctly and put them all into their music. So, the one thing that you've got to recognize is how much Aleister Crowley has influenced the 20th century, and especially through rock and roll. There's not a group out there that didn't honor him, from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones and on up, David Bowie to Tool. It just keeps going.
Absolutely. It's funny, if you ever listen to Station to Station by Bowie, he talks about the Kabbalah in Station to Station. And it's actually a metaphor for possession in some ways. And they were all high on cocaine during the entire Station to Station sessions. He just come out of filming The Man Who Fell to Earth, which is a metaphor for Lucifer. And he was still in character when he went to L.A. to record those sessions. And it's an interesting sequence in Station to Station. He talks about Malkuth the Kether, and he talks about his circle, in my circle. And Station to Station, the song, is an absolute ritual. And I just flashed on this as you were talking about this, Freeman, that Maynard's next group after Tool was A Perfect Circle.
Right. Now, as we went digging, we found a book from one of Aleister Crowley's acolytes, actually his following leader of the Ordo Templi Orientis, Kenneth Grant, who gave us a clue into the mark of the beast by saying it was the heart of the sigil of Nodens and that it was an O and an X. And this just opened realms for me because I'd already been chasing the abyss on the Tree of Life for quite some time, because I had learned that the number of the abyss, now on the Tree of Life, and let me just say, we're going to have a new television show coming out called Conspiracy Science Theater, and all of this is going to be very well documented and explained and presented to you. We want to present tools that you can use to share this knowledge with others, because who knows about the Kabbalistic Tree of Life and what a Sephirah is and what the heck Da'af is and why this relates to the beast and the abyss. But I've been on this trail for so long that when I was looking into corporate logos and the occult meanings hidden inside of them, I came to Philip 66, and I said, well, everything else fits into Kabbalah. Why not this? So I simply looked up 66 and learned that it was the number of the abyss, which is the hidden spot on the Tree of Life where the beast exists, where the fallen angels, they say those that have died insane live in there. That's Robert Anton Wilson. And it's the area of the abyss. this symbol 66 in Hebrew, 6 is the letter V. And so I was able to actually say, well, they're going to force this President W into office because his letter is W, the number of the beast, the 66, which, well, the sign of the beast, the mark of the beast. And as I started to relate these situations, I looked to Hitler's corporate logo, Volkswagen, and I see that it's 2 V's interlaced. And so you've got your 66 there, but then you put it together and you've got 666. So you've got the mark of the beast and the number of the beast together. Then to put it together and find out in English gematria, that is the combination of letters and numbers used in magic. In English, you can break down 666 as F, O, and X, because F is 6, O is 15, and X is 24. So these all equal 6, 666 in Fox. Well, so the OX symbolism was something that I was looking for because this was 66, and I was focused on the abyss. And then I learned that the OX was the mark of the beast, according to the OTO and Kenneth Grant. Well, as I started, this revelation came, I'm looking at the beast on the X-Men, and he's wearing the mark of the beast on him. I see Madonna's 33-minute sermon, she called it, at the Super Bowl. And she not only has the VV symbolism, but also the OX symbolism. I see Russell Brand up on stage with his Brand X. Well, guess what? It's the mark of the beast. I met the high priest of the Church of Satan, and what's he got embedded in the back of his skull but the OX? And he's like, well, it's the mark of the beast. It is being displayed over and over again in his relationship to the abyss on the Tree of Life. And when we start to get to the voice, has the VV symbolism, the peace sign with the V logo, then you're back to the VV, the 66. Well, their corporation that produces this is Talpa, and Talpa is in connection with another corporation called Endemol, which has actually a reptilian eye as their corporate logo.
That's
Talpa,
right.
that puts out the voice, their corporate logo is the Tree of Life, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, and yet with one variation, and that is that they move the spot for Kether, or heaven, into the abyss, and that is their corporate logo. So over and over and over again, then we got Miley coming out on the VMAs, and in this point, she invokes Kali. You can see her do it as she comes out of the pedo bear. She then steps out and has her tongue wagging, right? Constantly, this tongue out. This is the sign of Kali. But to make it even more, as she took on the character of Kali on stage, you can see her stroking imaginary hair, which Kali is shown to have, long hair and all these skulls around her. And she really is a symbol of the end of time, the end of everything, really, is what Kali represents. And so invoking that on stage on the VMAs as we're on the verge of World War III is kind of frightening to me.
Absolutely. And I actually broke this down pretty intensely. You should look into the Barclays Center at some point in time and look into the geometry and the architecture and the placement of the Barclays Center. It was created to be a ritual theater. And
is that in Brooklyn?
The Barclays Center is in Brooklyn. That's right. And how they came to actually bring that to Brooklyn is an interesting story in and of itself. They wound up displacing hundreds of people in a really, settled and, grounded old neighborhood. People lost their homes due to the Barclays Center coming in. And there's actually a documentary about people that tried to fight the monstrosity that is the Barclays Center coming into Brooklyn. I'll send you guys my newsletter so you can actually look at the placement. There is if you look at the Barclays Center itself, it has this weird outcropping from it looks like it's the east end. I think it's pointing east actually, which would make sense. This weird outcropping, and it's like an eye. It comes out from the center. And then there's an eye, which is it's like an eye of God, supposedly, right? And if you actually look at the Barclays Center from a particular angle, it's actually the Eye of Horus. They've got this thing all plotted out. The Barclays Center sits within a pyramidal block, and it's right in the center of this pyramidal block. So it's like symbols within symbols within symbols within the Barclay Center itself. So it's a ritual theater, and it makes total sense that they would have done this ritual decabie there. I'll send you guys the newsletter so you can check that out.
Well, one thing I do know about this stadium that you're talking about is that Beyonce and Jay-Z, I heard in a tabloid, they spend $1 million a year renting nursery space for their new baby. And so as far as I'm concerned, they're probably using this as an MK programming site, for the young ones.
It wouldn't surprise me. What's fascinating about the Barclay Center is the majority owner is Mikhail Prokhorov, he's a Russian oligarch, and I think he owns close to 70% of the Barclay Center. So there's this really weird and interesting relationship with the Barclay Center and Russia and Prokhorov. And you're right, we're about ready to go to World War III, and then the Miley ritual. There's all these weird, strange, interconnected pieces. There's the teddy bear, dozens of teddy bears, strange, nightmarish teddy bears on stage. And of course, Russia is the bear. There's all kinds of crazy collision of symbols taking place on that night of the VMAs. I wanted to ask you guys a question really quickly. You guys are doing so much good work and have been doing this for such a long time and enlightening lots of people and waking them up. And there's a lot of people that have taken your torch and they're off doing their own thing and sort of building on, what you've started. But, you guys were there at the beginning, ground zero, really. And now we have this proliferation of all these researchers. And it seems to me like I watch a little TV, mostly sports, but I watch mostly commercials. So I think we can learn a lot about commercials. And I see them pimping out this show called The Blacklist with James Spader, which is really just a ripoff of Silence of the Lambs. But I watched about 60 minutes of the commercial, and it seems incredibly dark, like darker than anything I've ever seen on TV before. And incredibly fear-based, like it's no longer a standing army. We've got these psychopaths. We've got these mass murderers. We've got all these dark and evil people in the world, and they're just waiting to wreak havoc. And we have to trust a guy that is evil and dark in order to save us. And it feels to me like the more that we do this work, or the more that you guys expose these symbols, and the more that the quote-unquote light gets shown on this stuff, they up the ante. And the symbols get darker and darker and become much more apparent and visible to us. Have you guys thought about that at all?
Yeah, I don't think it is a direct result of the exposing of it. I think that this has been the conditioning intended all along as we watch it kind of grow. Honestly, after I finished my Anna Nicole story, I was so traumatized because I'd learned how powerful this dark brotherhood was. I had really thrown myself into trauma-based mind control, into the understandings of these programmings and things that, it really frightened me. And when I was done, I could no longer look at television because I had post-traumatic stress disorder, I imagine, just from studying trauma-based mind control. And I could not look at anything without it just really affecting my soul. Now, as we watch the Dark Hero programming get more and more, now I predicted this and have been talking about this for quite some time. So this has been an integration to the Dark Hero programming. So I'm not surprised to hear about this television show as things got darker and darker. To me, watching a cheerleader get raped on Heroes in primetime television was quite amazing to me. But realize these are the kind of people that would put Whitney Houston's daughter in a bathtub and allow her to drown, and then the mother, Whitney, drown the next night, and then store her body in a room for 4, 5, 6 hours while they have a party around her. I mean, this was all mainstream news. Most people didn't realize that the daughter had drowned first and then Whitney the next day. But you start to look at these people and who they are, it's really quite frightening. And there was something I was going to say to the programming you were talking about with this latest show. because we're going to have Disney coming out with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and that'll be hitting our Dark Hero programming really soon. You see all the Dark Superman programming coming out, and the idea of becoming this, evil hero, the worship of the hero, of the villain, really.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Jamie, you wanted to chime in with something. Did we skip over that, or do you still have something you want to bring to the table?
Yeah, there's this weird YouTube video that you should look up, and it's this little girl. She calls herself Sith Girl, and you can see her dedicate herself to Darth Vader at Disneyland live on stage. They do a little play act where they let the kids come up and fight Darth Vader, but instead of putting out her lightsaber and attacking, she bows down, and the whole show kind of stops like, you're not supposed to do this. And she's like, no, I give myself to you, Dark Lord. And you can look that up on YouTube.
Wow. That is really creepy.
I wanted to add one more. Oh.
It's called Little Girl Sith Lord. What is it?
I'll look it up. I'll tell you in a second.
Okay. All right.
If I could add one more part to your Barclay Center discussion, I did a video called New World Order. I can't talk today. I need some water. New World Order Global Capitals. And in this, I share with you where the global capitals are forming. And most people, when they think of Kazakhstan, they think of Borat. They think of people in sheds with goats running around. But if you actually go to Kazakhstan, you'll find that they have the most modern city in the world, that they're working on the first indoor city, that their capital of Astana is just astonishing with its massive glass pyramid, with the Pyramid of Peace is what it's called, and that's where they have the global religion forming. Then you lead into this to these massive copper columns and this big orb up on a tower that has the architect's hand put in gold. Astana is mind-boggling. There's Astana, Canberra, are both actually designed. They're pre-planned cities that are designed as these ancient seals from Solomon, King Solomon's grimoire or magical works. The city plan is actually the seal of Solomon to bind demons and to control demons. And, these are our new world capitals.
Right. What about Brazil? I think that they have tried to do something similar with Brasilia, but it's pretty decrepit and grim right now. Are there any cities in Brazil that you see as being sort of in this same vector?
I hadn't noticed, no, because mostly I was focused on which nations were launching into space, because this has been a large portion of my study of the transhumanism, the idea that there's a telepresence robot, a mind transfer capable robot on the International Space Station, along with about 19 projects of stem cells seeking immortality. So Astana, of course, being in Kazakhstan, that's the main launch port for the International Space Station. And then, of course, I'm following Elon Musk with his Falcon rockets, his Merlin engines, and, his Dragon spacecrafts going up to the International Space Station. These are the nations that I'm watching, the extraterrestrial nations.
Mm-hmm. So there's a spaceport in New Mexico just outside of Truth or Consequences. I wonder if Truth or Consequences is going to be one of the new capitals of the New World Order based on that.
I'll have to look into that.
I saw a UFO in Truth or Consequences one time. That's a whole other story. Let's give people some ideas to what you guys are currently doing, where they can find out more about your work. We talked about your websites and a little bit more about Freeman TV. Let's give them an update on what's going on with you two.
Sure thing. Like I say, we are attempting to produce a show for the people's voice. If it doesn't go there, I guess it'll go to freemantv.com. They've been working on their own little back production, so us out here in the middle don't really know what's going on. But I am editing and creating an amazing show to give you these tools to share this information with nearly anyone. And I think that's what Jamie and I have picked up on at this point. We've given so much data. You know, you can go through Freeman TV. You could spend a decade there and never hear the same thing twice. So we decided we were the ones that could come forward with tools that would make it easy to share this type of information with strangers and with anyone. So we've produced weird stuff in that vein. It's our nine book series. We've got part 1 out now and part 2 coming very soon. And Weird Stuff is an encyclopedia of the occult to outline politics, pop stars, and new technologies. Getting back into ancient astronauts, ancient civilizations, and also, but right now, just dealing with the idea of Operation Culture Creation. So the first book really opens with the idea of how you're being programmed, what is magic, and how does it affect us. Jamie outlined her own form of magic called Slack magic to kind of combat, because we have lived in the miraculous realms for some time, the synchronistic realms, because we don't have jobs. We live solely on producing this content, and then that's solely supported by listeners and by fans. There are people that love us and want us to continue. That's the only place we get money, is from people that want to share with us. And it's it's always on the edge, but we keep going. So we're editing real hard right now, making this new television show, trying to make it something really cool. Jamie's writing like crazy and reading all her satanic books and getting all the data straight and ready to go. And FreemanTV.com just carries on. I continue to try and keep stories going up like the Miley articles and try to keep up to date with what's going on in the space warfare and all the high strangeness. But mostly we're working on these 2 projects, the Conspiracy Science Theater and Weird Stuff. And like you were saying, the flash drive, we're getting a call. The flash drive has it all. I put Weird Stuff on there, which is an animated version. I put the latest presentation I just gave, which is Aliens from Hell, which I'm very proud of. I worked very hard on that presentation and shocked anyone that had ever been to a conspiracy conference before. They had never seen anything like this. So Aliens from Hell, Weird Stuff, that's all on the flash drive, along with over 100 interviews and artwork. I create artworks to try to get all my conspiracies down into one image. So you get all that with the flash drive, and that actually supports our show. That's what's going to really get us and allow us to create some really cool tools for everybody else to use.
Well, we all appreciate it, the work that you and Jamie are doing, Freeman, and you've been tirelessly doing this now for well over a decade. So thanks for all of that, and thanks for coming on the show. And we hope that we can get you back on here when you get your new edition of Weird Stuff 2 or your TV show breaks. We'll bring you back on and we'll talk about that and more high strangeness in the post-millennial era that we're living in now.
Fantastic.
Okay. Thanks again, Freeman. Jamie, if you're there, thank you too as well, okay?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. You guys take care.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's Freeman Fly and Jamie Hanshaw giving you the skinny on the symbolic and ritualistic occult programming that is rampant in our society. And if that weren't enough, why don't we go straight to a source? Let's take a segue here, and I'm going to play my interview with Carre Otis, which I did 2 days ago, and we did not get into the explicit nature of the type of programming that Freeman and Jamie really deconstruct, but we did get into her own personal journey from an archetypal level. And I think you'll enjoy the interview. She's really open and honest and whip smart, and we cover a lot of ground. And it's basically from her book, Beauty Disrupted. So this is myself and Carre Otis from 2 days ago, and I will see you guys at the end of the interview to say goodbye, wish you a good weekend, and enjoy the interview. Here we go. Right now, I'd like to bring on my next guest, and it is with great honor and pleasure that we welcome Carre Otis to the show. Carre, of course, is synonymous with the word supermodel and also synonymous with a really profound and transformational book that she's written called The Beauty Disrupted, and it's about her life in the modeling industry and her life in relationship and her life in general. It was recommended to me by Shauna Holm, who's been a guest on this show. She said I wouldn't put it down after I picked it up, and she was right. Carre, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I want to thank you for writing this book. It's a very courageous book on many levels. There's a huge amount of vulnerability that you come forward with in terms of your life and some of the personal tragedies and challenges and some of the dysfunctional patterns that we all tend to go through. It's all right out there. What prompted you to go the distance with this and tell the world exactly what had taken place in your life and reveal some of the darker and more hidden corners of not only just the modeling industry, but your own experience?
You know, after I had my daughters, who are now 5 and 6, you as a parent look at things differently all of a sudden through different eyes. And there had been a really big part of my past that I had just not spoken about. And, talk about trying to wrap something up in a pretty package and then getting to a point in life where, it's not like that. Things are not just that simple. I had been very silenced about my marriage, my ex-marriage, and sort of, very typical in the sense of being a victim, to protecting a perpetrator. I was playing out this silence. A part of me becoming a mother and realizing that I had 2 daughters that were going to go out into the world, I felt like it was a gift both to me and to my voice and empowerment and moving forward, as well as to young girls that were battling and had battled a lot of what I encountered in my life, both as a young woman in America, in the West, as well as in the modeling industry, as well as a young woman who'd been married into an abusive relationship and an industry, that it would benefit many if I were to come out and speak honestly and courageously about a lot of the things that I faced. So it was indeed a gift to my daughters and a gift to other women, but also to myself, and stepping out and really claiming, you can transform your life. We are not our stories, and that we can completely change what that story is.
I want to get back to the beginning of your story because I think it's very important. But before I do, I wanted to just bring up the topic and subject of Mickey Rourke. He is the person that you refer to as your marriage, your first marriage, and the perpetrator. And in your book, you talk about at the end of the book, sort of watching Mickey's success with the wrestler and being compassionate and I think somewhat happy for him, if I could read between the lines, and that yet Mickey comes out and refers to your relationship and his in a pretty negative light in some ways. But what I didn't get is with the book, obviously, because it was yet to come out, what does he think of the book? How has he responded to this?
That's a really good question, and part of me was obviously concerned about that. And then a part of me really had to let go of, wanting people to love, like, respect me for my story. And what I heard, of course, he was displeased. Of course, the feedback to me was really interesting, and it was as if I kind of broke this silence that I think a lot of women feel that they should, or a lot of victims of abuse, spousal abuse, domestic violence, feel that they need to continue to be silent. So I was kind of the not so cool girl for quite a while, even in interviews with men. with male interviewers. There was a lot of flack I got, and the feeling that I got was, you know, you were supposed to stay silent about something. He was pretty quiet. There was no legal ramifications, you know. He didn't come after me. I mean, the story is such, and there was definitely and has never been any ownership on his part of our life together.
Well, I definitely want to examine your relationship with him, and we can return to that later in the interview. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and just because it's in the front of my brain, I don't want to forget about it.
Yeah.
It has to do with the amount of plastic surgery and work he's had done to his face, and the sort of the intuitive kind of hit that I got that surrounded this, and perhaps maybe you can fill it in or clarify it, is that this was somebody who could no longer face himself. He could not look himself in the mirror. So there was this massive alteration that took place, and he's not even recognizable anymore to a lot of people. Is this something that you've actually thought about in terms of why he went so far and extreme in terms of
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, when we witness anybody who, you know, goes under the knife to that extent, you know, we could say, let's take Michael Jackson, you know, where clearly they're trying to fix something, you know, they're trying to fix something from the outside in.
Yeah.
And as opposed to doing that internal work. And let's face it, the internal work is a bear sometimes. I mean, it takes balls, you know, to jump into the fire and to work on yourself from the inside out. And I think the tricky thing has been in this culture, and certainly in that industry, people turn the other way, and you've got a bunch of yes men around you. And, you know, I have only looked at that situation with him, I think, in the beginning with concern, with questions, you know, like, you know, really what's going on, to really realizing it to me, it has been a glaring sign of his and others' suffering. And there's a great amount of suffering that goes on, and there's certain people that deal with it in different ways. And clearly, you know, I think it's clear which way we saw him deal with his suffering. And it's unfortunate, you know, what a handsome, talented individual. He's still, you know, unbelievably talented, but what you say, you know, is true. It's very hard to recognize who's there.
Yeah. Let's go back to the beginning, and you weave your tale masterfully in this book. It's seamless, and your voice is consistent throughout. And one of the things that I love is the sense that you're really on a journey with you. And it starts at the beginning when you're moving from San Francisco to Marin County, and I know this scene so well. You know, you're going through the fog, and you hit that tunnel on the Marin Grade, and there's the rainbow, and you come out, and it's literally kind of a different world. It's sunny on the other side. It's the 1970s. You're in a yellow Volvo station wagon. I mean, this is the archetype for transmigration in, you know, Northern California in 1970s, Marin County, and you're so hopeful that this is going to be a start to a new life. And then you get there, and you go to this house that you're living in, and you pull back the cover of the pool, and there's all these dead birds and bugs and other critters that are in the pool. And I just thought that that's the detail that you were able to retrieve from that was really compelling. In fact, the amount of detail in general that you were able to retrieve throughout the book was really compelling. Did you feel like when you pulled the cover back in that pool that in some ways was a symbol for your life that you were going to have to deal with at some point later down the road?
Completely. I was a child who was very tuned in to the subtleties, to, you know, things that weren't necessarily spoken, but I heard them loud and clear. And so for me, you know, going back and writing this book, it is a spiritual journey. It is a journey where there are, you know, very clear signs that manifest in physical ways. And for me, you know, going to that house in Green Bay and looking and seeing what was in that pool, it was like peering down into this portal of, you know, the journey I was about to take. And it was ominous. And those things, you know, I don't forget them. They're so embedded in my mind and life. I still continue to experience life with these sort of snapshots of, wow, an owl just flew past me. Wow. I take notice. And so, I'm glad that you picked that up in the book, because it is a journey. I mean, there's so many subtleties in life, and those of us who are tuned in, they really ring very clearly, especially in retrospect, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of sparks for me this book that was written by Alice Miller called The Trauma of the Gifted Child.
Yeah, totally.
And you are, you fit perfectly within that rubric, and having, all of this sensitivity and this kind of multidimensional awareness, but yet you're in a 5-year-old body in a 5-year-old frame.
It's painful. It was painful
and
confusing, and I think many people that experience life like that get that. It's painful and confusing, and until you can sort that out and get some very, very grounded tools in your toolbox to be able to cope, then you're really floundering.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming.
One of the other things that you're very upfront and honest with is your learning disability. You were diagnosed with dyslexia, which was fairly new at that time.
Very new.
And you went through a fair amount of shame as a result of that fairly early on, and it kind of marks also a big part of your path and your journey. Do you want to speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to the time, that I was diagnosed with it, and there was not a lot known, and the teachers were not trained in terms of how to detect and how to deal and what the options were in terms of learning, and kids, much like they still are, unfortunately, today, were then expected to learn a certain way, and I've never been that way. I've never learned like most other people. I've been not the majority. And that is my uniqueness. Now I know that is my gift, but, put that into the hands of a second or third grader who, already for several years has been told, you're stupid, you're slow, teachers being frustrated with me. It definitely formed my self-esteem. It definitely formed my self-esteem and really impacted the choices that I made, the things I thought I could do, the sort of victimization I fell prey to. And I gave up on myself academically. It was I either figured it out or I wasn't going to, and I was going to give up on that. And by the time, I'd been diagnosed and I'd been down that journey, and the school had given up on me, and I was placed into a public school system who could not do anything with that. I was done. I already had decided for myself that I would never succeed at school, so why bother? So I dropped out of that, freshman year.
I'm wondering if the dyslexia, it's kind of like we get these, in one area of our lives we have these challenges or blocks, and in other areas we have immense gifts to compensate for them. And I'm wondering if your ability to recall such great detail and remember your own story and weave has something to do with the fact that you might have been dyslexic. This is another capacity or another gift that you would ultimately resurrect later on in your life.
Absolutely. I have no doubt. I mean, there are studies and statistics that show today that many dyslexics, have a genius IQ. They just don't necessarily learn the way everybody else does. And, this is something to look at. And absolutely the way that I related to life, the way that I think I recorded my life was very visual, and musical. There was a rhythm. When I wrote my book, I had to read back to myself what I wrote out loud, because for me it's a rhythm, and if it's not in the rhythm, then it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So for me, things are very rhythmical, and that has been my writing as well.
One of the things that really comes through, again, early on, is the inheritance of patterns and dysfunction from our parents. And I think your parents and my parents are not too far apart in age, maybe separated by 4 or 5 years, but their parents are probably pretty close to where my parents' parents were. And those parents were the children of Depression-era parents. They grew up in the Depression.
Yep.
And they had kids who became your parents and my parents, and those kids inherited a massive psychological and emotional burden from their parents.
Without a doubt.
And it's one of those things that I don't think gets talked about very much. And
I agree. I agree.
And so, you know, they're thrust into the 20th century with all of the temptations, the responsibilities, the expectations, and yet they're dealing with an emotional cavity from another time. And it was up to us in some ways to kind of bring this full circle and heal this rift that happened, you know, during the 1920s where kids didn't have anything to eat or a hug to have or anything along those lines. Yeah. Did you feel this way, that you were actually doing the work of prior generations while you were writing this?
Absolutely. And I remember being around 5 years old and being so despondent and clear with what I was seeing in my own family as a pattern, and literally saying, I'm going to break this chain. I'm going to break this chain. And for me, writing this book and identifying this, and my relationship today with my parents is totally transformed. You know, it's totally transformed. And so, yes, writing this also felt like a breaking that chain. And for me, that's kind of been my mission in this lifetime, I feel, is speaking the truth. And it's been very uncomfortable for my friends and family, because I would rather talk about it no matter how uncomfortable or difficult than ever again live in the silence of disbelief. There is just nothing, no place, you know, I don't want to have anything to do with that. So I talk a lot. I speak a lot. It makes people a little uncomfortable, and I try to be as loving and skillful as I can, and diplomatic as I can, and I'm pretty good with that as the Libra that I am.
You are. I was just going to say, you're Libra. You can handle that. That's part of your...
Totally. So, yes, this book was absolutely that process, and wanting to do that so that there is not this, you know, wave that comes over my own kids, that they get to have a really different childhood and life and be very empowered and aware and make empowered choices. Definitely my mission.
So one of the things that, you know, I just did your chart before we got together here, and one of the things that I noticed is that you have Uranus right on your ascendant and conjunct your sun, and that's generally considered a very rebellious aspect, somebody who wants freedom and wants to break the rules in order to understand who they are on a personal level. And clearly that comes through in the book, especially at an early age, and how you really cut against some pretty heavy-duty social grain with dating much older boys, not even boys, but men. You know, it's a pretty controversial, you know, section, I think, in terms of how we view these things today. Maybe it wasn't quite like that in the 70s and 80s. I don't think it really was to some extent, but looking at that, what was going through your mind when you were really breaking some pretty intense social rules?
Rules.
Yeah.
You know, for me, in this lifetime age, it hasn't felt like it's applied. You know, I've not related to the ages that I've been. It's not related. It just doesn't seem to have limited me. And I think I was really experiencing, you know, at a young age with this concept of, you know, of power, and having felt powerless, having felt, you know, from a young age and turning into looking like a certain kind of girl, definitely experiencing being objectified at an early age. And then, of course, you know, the irony of then getting into an industry that completely objectifies women. That I was really pushing, you know, who's in power here? And I think the misconception, and this still is part of young women's lives at this point, and I think it's even more radical now, is that there's this misconception that if you're sexually active, if you're the doer, if you're going to do it, then you're the one in power. And I think there's really a missing piece, and it was missing for me because I didn't have the mentors, these female mentors. You know, the missing piece is this sense of sacred around our sexuality and femininity. And that, you know, it's not something to just be tossed about in this frivolous way, that it's something, it is empowering and sacred, and that it takes a while as women, you know, as men, to find who we are and to find our power, to pleases us and what doesn't. And part of that process is learning how to say no. And nobody ever taught me how to say no, that I could say no. Girls were just supposed to, sit down, look pretty, and shut up. And I rebelled against that from the beginning, but I misconstrued it. I took it to the other edge, so to a place where at least I thought I was in control. But the problem is, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old is in control, especially when she's beckoning an older individual. In that way, not having mentors, how do you know that game that you're playing, one, that you're trying to find your footing, to be loved, to be approved of, all through the physical. That is not validating in any way, but I think even then, as culture and media tell us and tell girls and boys now, this is the way that it's suggested that we get all of these things, is through the physical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's very reckless, and this is sort of the work I'm doing now, working as an advocate and doing these trainings. I'm really working to educate and empower this other aspect of media's influence on youth.
Mm-hmm.
And cultural influence on youth. So I was definitely, in it big time then, and like I said, the irony then moving into an industry that just totally loves that was really, really damaging.
It's interesting, and I had made this connection before as it relates to the media, but when I think of your relationship with Elliot, who was, roughly 18 years your senior, the scene that I flash on is Fast Times at Ridgemont High with Jennifer Jason Leigh meeting the older guy car stereo salesman. Mm-hmm. And that was part of Cameron Crowe's experience, obviously, but at the same time it was being portrayed in the media, not necessarily in a positive light, but it was out there. It was, it was floating around. Whatever happened to Elliot the Balloon Man?
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. The audacity for him to actually reach me through Twitter. And names were changed within this,
sure,
obviously. But he recognized himself and was so proud of himself for making it into this book that he actually contacted me through Twitter. And honestly, beyond that, I have no idea. I don't carry rage, resentment, and anger, but there's a few people, just for the hell of it, if I saw them, I might just smack them. It's like, wake up, people, wake up. My God, because you look back on your life and you start to understand there is this energy. There were several perpetrators. There were several people that came across my path that, I was a kid, and this is what I've had to, sort of get to within my own work, is I was a kid, and now being an adult, I know what it's like. I have an expectation that grown-ups around my daughters behave like grown-ups, and nothing else is acceptable. Mm-hmm. Period. So I kind of come with that mama bear to the me that was the child then, of like, wow, come on, act like an adult.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I have fierce boundaries around my life and myself and my family today.
Completely understandable based on contents of the book in your life. Yeah. And I'm the same way. I'm a dad, and I had a pretty crazy wild life, and I've kind of turned a corner, and I am the fierce Papa Bear, or Yeah. Yeah, I am. Yeah. It's just the way it is. And
kids need that.
Yeah, they do.
My kids need that. We needed that. I needed that. I did not get that, and the kids need that.
Why do you think your father was absent in your life to the degree that he was, and that you needed him?
It's one of the greatest gifts in terms of growing up and then being able to see who your parents were and are, without their relationship to us. And as I pieced my father's life together in terms of his own, tragic upbringing with his young sister dying and growing up in the, face of Christian scientists and not receiving medical attention or Novocaine when he had cavities and, and the Depression era and all of this, I totally understand why he could not be available. I mean, just because, you know, you are a parent, you know, I mean, it's sad to say, it does not mean you're prepared. And he was not prepared. He was ill-prepared, like many parents during that time. I mean, we've spoken about yours. It was very common for the sort of MIA parents, and they were still playing with these gender roles and who they're supposed to be. And I totally understand that now. And I think the greatest thing, too, is anyone who can do the work and to not be the victim of their story, but be here today having done the work, is just so right on to me. And that's so my dad. He's one of my dearest friends and confidants, the best grandfather to my daughters. And he gets to do it all again, you know. He gets to, like, make up for it. And it's perfect. Yeah, so I understand, as well as with my mother. They both had that kind of typical, not typical, what's typical, but upbringing from that era, where things were behind closed doors. There was not a lot of communication. You did not seek help for your problems. You know, you kept it under close wraps. You kept your cards close to your heart, and you just didn't talk about things. You know, and now we might over-talk things, but it's better than not talking about things.
Yeah, there is that sweet spot in the balance, but I totally agree with you. It was really, everything was behind closed suburban doors at that time.
Oh, yes, horrible. I couldn't live with it.
Yeah. Well, even when you did your best to step into what would be a normal role for a young woman, 7th, 8th grade, you decide that you're going to have a boyfriend that's your age, and all of a sudden, what looks to be a very promising young romance turns out to be something incredibly tragic. And, of course, I'm talking about Scott.
Yeah.
Boy, that section really floored me. And
that was a heartbreaker. You know, I'm doing a lot of research right now on cyberbullying for training, and Scott is definitely still around in many ways, and suicide is just so confusing and so heartbreaking. It's a hard one to get. I mean, death in any way it comes is a hard one to get your head around. Suicide is really, really tricky.
And we're talking youth suicide coming from supposedly a good family, but obviously there was a huge amount of expectation and burden placed on him. And when he...
And secrets.
Yep.
Right? Again, so telling of the time, you know? So telling of that time. The secrets that we all kept, that parents kept, that kids kept, the lack of, you know, attention and help that kids got. Especially there was something, and you know this, in the Bay Area. It was like this little bubble. You know, you had a lot of, it wasn't LA, but you had a lot of musicians and musicians' kids and a lot of money and no real reality check. And a lot of parents that were stoned or drunk or, you know, in their own stuff. So Scott was a tragic flip.
So just to kind of enlighten people, Scott took his life after what appeared to be an overdose on, was it cocaine? Was he overdosing on cocaine?
Yeah, it was cocaine, and then just couldn't rationalize with losing a soccer game and took his life with his father's gun.
And that's a huge amount of burden to be put on your shoulders, being pulled out of PE by him and just looking into his frenzied face, not knowing what to do. I mean, you must have been on some level of trauma and overwhelm, even during, if not after.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, you know, being in that situation that, you know, as an adult, that would be hard to deal with. Like, well, what do you do? What do you say? How do you get this person to help? This is on the spot. But as, you know, 12, 13 years old, you know, you've got a young person coming to you that's clearly high off their gourd, and what do you do to help them? It's like, it's too big. You know, I had no idea what to do. I was in over my head, like so many times in my life, in over my head.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's like, if I were there, I would say, well, I don't want my boyfriend or my girlfriend, whoever it was, or my friend, to get into trouble, right? I mean, that's kind of the first thing, right?
Oh, right.
So if you don't want to have them get into trouble, then what do? You can't really talk to anybody and learn anybody because they're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
So, and then unfortunately, you are put in front of the entire school, which votes to dismiss you and expel you, which is a huge event in anybody's life. You know, I mean, let alone
a huge shaming event that was very unethical, and you know, you'd hope nothing like that happens today. But I've had kids from that time come up to me and tell me how devastated they were to be part of that. It was horrible, you know. So that just kind of like put the damper on where, you know, what I had no place within the school system or my peers. There was just complete fallout and disconnect.
It seems totally medieval what they did.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, interesting past life ramifications too there.
Yeah.
So the result of that is your parents just don't know what to do, and they decide to send you to an alternative school in the Sierras, which is both really positive for you, but also in some ways negative to the extent that you decide that you're just going to ultimately drop out of school and chart your own path.
Yep.
But you made some very strong connections from that period too, as well.
Yeah, indeed.
They've stayed with you.
Yeah.
What was Les Claypool like as a young roommate?
Oh my gosh, that was just such a crazy Berkeley house experience. It was hysterical. I remember one of the things he always said was, "Whoa, Nellie." It was like one of his little catchphrases. He was actually really, really sweet, a little bit shy, but really probably the most normal, sweet person in that household.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was a baby. I mean, my God, I don't know. I guess nobody's really thinking much. I mean, you know, he's a total kid, crashing on the couch and couldn't contribute much. You know, couldn't hold down a job, could barely get a job because I was underage. I was just like, I look back, I'm just like, are you kidding me?
So that would have been for you, what, around 1984? Is that right?
84, yeah, because 85, I think, was my first L cover, and I was already in Paris.
Right.
And it was shortly after that I went to Paris, yeah.
So Berkeley was actually a fun place to hang out then. They had the Berkeley Square, they had the Stone. Totally. There was a lot of music happening in Berkeley at that time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, just remember that. So in terms of your progression, you just eventually you get sick of the scene that you're in. You have a boyfriend that betrays you. I don't want to get into that. I want to save some details for the book. You have a boyfriend that betrays you and ultimately pushes you into the realm of modeling. And you've got that Sagittarian moon in your chart, which means you're pretty much open for anything, any kind of new adventure. But I don't think even with a Sagittarian moon you could be prepared for going to New York and then just weeks after that being thrust out into Paris. Were you in communication with your parents during this time at all?
Was I? No, I actually wasn't. I wasn't at all.
Interesting. So you just wanted to experience this, explore it, be free, and find out who you were, and you know, live according to the School of Hard Knocks. And it's actually pretty courageous. I was going to put 2 words ago there, creative and courageous. It was pretty courageous. Do you look back in that time as your life being an act of courage, or was it really being driven or motivated by fear or the desire to just get away from your past?
Good question. I mean, I think I still had to play the role of being, you know, courageous and tough because, you know, the other would be to be fearful, and you can't move if you're that fearful. So I think I really, like, stepped into the boots of, okay, I'm going to do this. You know, I felt like I had to do it because I really felt like there were no other options. You know, in the book I speak about, you know, I could have become a prostitute, you know, and yet I couldn't have become a prostitute. But it was like, okay, where am I going? What am I doing? the card turned, the table turned, and the opportunity came up to go to New York, go to Paris, go to Milan. And was I fearful? Yeah, but could I tell anybody about it? No. So it was one of those things where I just had to keep convincing myself. And I was in frightening, scary, horrible experiences. I had very little money. But there was also, there was also an agent that believed in me. There was also that tricky situation, which still exists, like this transparency, that you've got an agent that's going to pay your way to get to this photo shoot, and you go to do a job, but you owe the agent for flying you here, there, and the other. So you never see a dime. You just have basically what you need to have to stay alive paid for. But you never see a dime of any job you ever did.
It sounds a lot like pimps, if you ask me.
It sounds what?
A lot like pimps.
Completely. I mean, I don't dispute that at all. That's why when people say, would you ever let your kids get involved in modeling? No. No. And should your kids get involved in modeling? No. No. I mean, any industry that puts that much tension on your success is solely connected to your physical body, which is constantly changing from, pre-puberty to puberty, and then into your 20s, and then into your gray hairs and wrinkles. There is no security in that, no self-worth, no self-esteem to be had. And somehow you got to know that as a young woman. The clock is forever ticking, even when you're 19 years old. It's a reckless industry and a reckless game. And by the way, the only two industries that I know of where women get paid more than men, porn and modeling.
It's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but it's true. So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Well, if you would not let your girls model, and you're advocating that other people do not let their children model, do you think modeling has outlived its purpose? And if it has, what does it say about the objectification of beauty or beauty in general? I mean, this has gone on for millennia with women and men. I mean, what does that mean for society as a whole?
Well, I'm on the board of the Model Alliance that is working to protect minors' rights within the modeling industry. So we have mostly minors working in the industry in sexually provocative advertisement, being sexually harassed. There's been no union, no system to protect these young laborers. So Model Alliance is working to do that. And in terms of modeling, I think it can be a wonderful industry, but I also think it needs the playing field needs to be leveled in the sense that women and men need to be depicted realistically with all shapes, sizes, colors, ages. And if we can use media in an empowered way, then we can use it for positive and we can make some unbelievable changes. But we are so not there. And the objectification of women, of children, the sexualization of children, the premature sexualization of girls is through the roof. It is dangerous. It's a dangerous game, and it is affecting our kids, it's affecting our boys, our girls. It's affecting all of us. So, I'm talking a lot about this and writing a lot about this and trying to implement some programs to create media watchdogging and a certain level of awareness before middle school, because it's contributing to violence against women and men. It's contributing to eating disorders amongst men and women. It's contributing to cyberbullying, across the board. And we've condoned it in the culture. We've become completely desensitized by all of this, where we really need to get engaged again.
Well, I completely agree with you, and we have a culture of enabling, both from the outer circle, which is a witness to it, but even more importantly, on the inner circle, where people, and you've seen this in the fashion industry, where everybody is just kind of a gang of enablers. And we saw it with Sandusky. We saw it with Jimmy Savile and any number of perpetrators. And, in fact, Sandusky is even trying to get a new trial. I mean, this is how deeply this kind of, consensual codependency and enabling runs. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how much of this have you run into, not just in terms of the fashion industry, but with legislators, lawmakers? Are there people that really want to listen to you, or are there people that just want to move you along and turn a deaf ear to what you're bringing up?
There's a huge amount of avoidance, and I think it's tricky. It's very tricky. There's a huge amount of avoidance. There's a huge amount of all of us not taking responsibility for our own actions. I had just watched that movie Lovelace last night about the porn star and her tragic story, and I, of course, then had nightmares about my ex-husband, a very similar story, and was talking with my friend about this movie, and she said, "Oh yeah, that freak," and I just thought, "Oh my God, no, not that freak." We're all still judging, talking, like the negative talk we have in our society. I mean, you turn on any news thing, and we're asking women, well, what did you have to do to get that position? Did you do this? Did you do that? So you had plastic surgery. I mean, like this superficial level of finger pointing, and very few of us taking responsibility for how we are living our lives. And I think it first starts with us, and that we just can't give up. But there's a huge amount of avoidance. And I remember, here I had written my book, and I'm out on my press tour, and I could not believe, the situation that had happened in Paris with my agent raping me. I had actually named that name. No one asked me. That agent is still an agent in France. France would not touch my book. My book is not translated into French. There was an embargo on my book in France. I recall going on to several different, nationwide interviews on TV, and them being very specific with me about what we could not talk about. So it's blown me away, the media machine, and it's blown me away the big boys at the top who can squash a lot of truth stories. And I think, Shona Holmes says it, but women and men, I think, who speak out, it's easy for us to become very, very unpopular and potentially very dangerous,
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
The man you're speaking of is Gerald.
Uh-huh.
And did he marry Linda Evangelista?
Yes.
Are they still married?
No, he's been through several marriages. I can't tell you how many models and friends of models have emailed me after my book came out, just, weeping that the same thing had happened to them with Gerald, the same thing had happened to their friends, with Gerald. That it's a story that goes over and over and over again, and he was busted by the BBC. Ironically, though, you can't find any of that footage.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's amazing what can be buried if one wants, or if there's enough money behind it.
So your book has been banned in France?
Yeah.
Wow. Contraband.
Totally.
Well, what do you expect from a country that houses Roman Polanski? That's all
Yeah, right? Oh my God.
And I was even born there, so I do have a fondness for France, but not in this regard. So astrologically, we are in Venus and Scorpio right now, and Venus is in Scorpio in your chart, so this might be a good time to segue into the relationship with Mickey. And one of the things that I kept getting as a theme from your book, archetypally, was Persephone, and Persephone goes to the underworld, and she journeys to the underworld to become a lover of Hades in the underworld. And your life is archetypally Persephonic, if that's a word, because you encounter these Hades-like characters, and probably the most famous and the most riveting example of that is Mickey in the book. And boy, what do you say about a Persephone archetype? You're there to deal with darkness, you're there to deal with shadow, and you're there to deal with the personification of that in relationship to, who you're involved in with relationship. At any point along the way, did you ever realize that Mickey was perhaps a very dark teacher for you?
Yeah. I did. I don't think I realized it, ironically, so heavily until right after we were married. Like, I had the hunch, I had the hint, but there was a part of me that was so naive and still so sold on the fairy tale. I'm ironically just reading Cinderella Ate My Daughter. The fairy tale that, you know, is given to so many of us. And if you love hard enough, if you obey enough, if you stick with it enough, you know, it can turn it around. You know what? That's BS. There are certain things you can't turn around with that will. And he was not one of the things I could turn around. Clearly we had karma together, but I think, you know, there were lots of omens, lots of signs, lots of, obvious. It was like, you know, somebody listening to this, having read the book, it's like, okay, you were hit over the head with a bat. How many times? But, you know, we all have our own journey with realizing the horrors of some things. And for me, it was, you know, I'd ridden on the coattails of hope. And after we got married, it truly sank in. Oh my God, I'm totally up the creek here.
Yeah.
You know, and that horrible feeling of I'm in over my head and I'm just there's no way out. Like, there's just no way out. I was like trying to deal with the devil, you know? And a certain amount of resignation with it, because I had no idea what to do and where to go.
Yeah.
Which is also very typical just on this human level of, you know, domestic abuse and spousal abuse. And it's just a very common feeling.
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me about the proposal is that he had a sword that he had Harry Carry knife, and he was putting it to his abdomen, basically saying he was going to kill himself if you did not agree to marry him. And as I read that, I was flashing back on Scott's death.
Right.
And boy, I mean, I couldn't imagine how you must have felt in that moment if you were even if you weren't cognizant that you were kind of revisiting the death and the mortality of somebody that you loved. Certainly on a psychic level and on a subconscious level, that must have been a massive trigger for you.
It was. It was a huge trigger for me. This link to guns, right? This link to violence. This, you know, there had been that event at the 76 station, and then the shooting, the suicide with Scott, and then this incident where, the fear of, finally potentially being able to do the right thing and saving somebody from committing suicide. Also that being having done the therapy and work I've done, realizing, you know, what a horrifically manipulative move, and just so codependent and so wrong in so many ways for anybody to threaten death if you don't marry them. You know, and somebody obviously who had, you know, who was healthy and in their right mind would have recognized that as get the hell out, run the other way. Unfortunately, you know, I was a young girl who really didn't have those tools in my box. So it was unbelievably conflicting. It was unbelievably confusing. And I think in that moment it really swayed me to just want to say yes to potentially finally save this person in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Mickey was bipolar?
Yes. Yes.
And he was taking quite a bit of prescription meds too, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. Which would lead to even more erratic behavior.
Right.
One of the things that also struck me in the book is your relationship with women. And one could look at it and say that you have a bisexual relationship with both men and women, because you are close to a number of female characters and friends in your life and in the book. How have you resolved that in your own life, or is that something that doesn't need to be resolved? It's just part of who you are and part of your continuum?
You know, it just is who I am, and I think it's the Libra in me. It's this. It is who I am. I've never had any issue with love and sexuality and thinking the person I love should be a certain gender, or, you know, I've had no judgment around that, and that love for me is love. I definitely have a physical preference, you know, of what's around me sexually. For me, you know, I'm in a totally monogamous, committed marriage, and in love with Matthew. If he were a woman, but he were Matthew, I'd probably be just as in love. So it's always been more about, just because it was a male or female, it's not that it didn't elicit sexual feelings. I've always been really free with, you know, whatever that was that manifested is just perfect. And raise my daughters, I mean, obviously not verbally, but I'm completely tolerant and accepting of it, and I have not one bit of issue around it, and I feel very fortunate for that, because I see people who struggle with that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, this intensity that you have explored in your relationships, this dark, deep, shamanic, transformative intensity, even extends into your choice of religion and spirituality. Some people would be drawn towards perhaps the ecstatic wave of kirtan and, you know, Hindu chant, or they may decide that, you know, Jesus is the redemptive road for them, or maybe the solace of Zen Buddhism, silence and peace. But you go for Tibetan Buddhism, which at its core is also very dark and deals with demons and deals with the void and comes out of this whole bone tradition. Have you made any connections between your attraction to Tibetan Buddhism with your relationship path and your kind of archetypal expression of being a Persephonic character?
That's a good question. For me, Tibetan Buddhism discussed all that nobody would discuss.
Right.
It spoke about death in a very frank way. And I wanted to know about these things. And then, again, very similar to the loves that I've had in my life and the lovers I've had in my life, my beautiful teacher, you know, that I finally met, it didn't really matter who he was or what he, you know, he was this teacher I had a connection with. And there's nothing at all sexual, but I'm saying in terms of, it didn't really matter if he was a Tibetan Buddhist, you know, Dzogchen teacher or you know, that there was a recognition of familiarity. I think this is something that has really led me to where I have been and go on in my life, is a certain familiarity to people, to things, and that it's providing for me answers to some of the questions that I have along my path. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you have gone through just about everything a person can really go through in terms of, I wouldn't necessarily call it hitting bottom, but you've definitely, you've clanged around the sides. You've gone through some serious addiction. I've dove
in pretty deep to the depths.
Yeah. I mean, you kicked heroin in Mexico, and interestingly enough, Mickey helps you with that. And so you've gone through a lot of these deep and profound transformations, and then you find out that your heart is not right. And this is what kind of blew me away. You find out your heart's not right, and then you have these 3 holes in your heart. And I'm wondering if you ever made any connection between those 3 holes being your father, Scott, and Mickey.
Very clever. Very good. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Isn't it amazing how our anatomy is?
Oh my gosh, the physical manifestation of things. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I think that just to me, I've always seen the connection of these worlds. And I see it too. I really opt for a natural approach to pretty much everything and believe in the innate ability our bodies have and the wisdom we have to heal. And that there's a lot of manifestations in terms of cancers and diseases that have a lot to do with these energetic influences and occurrences that happen and offenses that happen and unresolved issues that happen that manifest in our physical body. I've seen it again and again and witnessed my own healing,
Yeah. Okay, so Liam Henstridge or Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Mickey in the cinematic version of your life?
Probably the latter.
Okay, that's what I was thinking too. All right, so let's find out where people can find out more about the work that you're doing if they want to pitch in, get involved, if they've had any experiences in their life that they need some enlightenment or some share with. Where can they go to find that out?
Well, right now I'm on the advisory board of the Model Alliance. I am also an ambassador for National Eating Disorder Association. I'm currently working on my second book with my writing partner and business partner, Dr. Sarah Spinner, and that is a journey of being a woman and healing from sexual trauma, reclaiming our sexuality. I'm also working on a series of trainings for the Seneca Institute, and the first one is dealing with media's influence on youth, everything from porn to social media platforms to video games, magazines, music videos, all of these things. And another training on self-esteem, eating disorders, body image, addictions.
Mm-hmm.
These will be trainings that we'll start doing consultations and offer to a larger audience, but first we're sort of working it out and doing our research with the support of the Seneca Institute for Advanced Training.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always visit my website at carrierights.com and see what's going on there.
carrierights.com.
carrierights.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've gone almost 60 minutes, and I didn't even mention Wild Orchid. Is that a good thing that I didn't mention Wild Orchid?
Well, probably. I mean, you can if you want, but it's just so...
It's not that I didn't want to. It's just I found other parts of your life to be more...
So much more interesting.
Compelling.
I agree. There's enough, of a depiction. You get an idea enough of, the journey, which is Wild Orchid, too. I mean, but there's, Yeah. I don't find any need to mention Wild Orchid.
Well, if there's anybody that has the street cred to address the issues that you do, Carre Otis, you are that person. And I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your very honest and candid story about your life. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So it was Carre Otis from just a couple days ago, and it was Wednesday to be precise. Venus in Scorpio conjunct Saturn, and that's the net effect. Wonderful interview. Very, very powerful and courageous person, and you can find out more about her at carrierights.com. So that's it for today's show. Thank you to Freeman and Jamie Hanshaw for checking in at the beginning of the hour, and Carre Otis as well. I'll be back on Monday with the mashup. And I will be back next Friday with James Swager and John Anthony West. And we're going to be talking about Atlantis and Egypt and the hidden history of both places and how they affect our time. And hopefully next Wednesday, Rob Till at Fixed Stars will try to hook that up again. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. A big shout out to the chat room. Love you guys. And stay dry and safe. It's going to be a heck of a weekend with storms. Take care.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.